Hey all. So I'm now in episode 2 of my story, and I'm going to produce this directly after the next one. So I don't know if I got any feedback on the first one, which said, "Hey mate, please don't go raw. Please stick to a script." I'm going to assume it was a okay, and I'm going to continue to do a bit of a raw dump of my story. But in the last, just as a quick recap, I spoke a little bit about the fairy tale beginning. I spoke a little bit about the first 6 months of the relationship, and my own kind of failings that uh, created essentially the foundation for boundary pushing and lines that were not crossed. This episode, I'm going to move now beyond that point and start talking about the kind of post plus 6 month period of the relationship, and where we start to see part of intermittent reinforcement, part of conditioning, and escalations of abuse. I'll start to lay all that out within this episode, and I'll see how far I get on my story because hopefully, I can kind of get a little bit beyond that. But let's talk about a line not crossed. So, what does that mean? So, a line not crossed means that as you are in these abusive relationships, an abuser will start to do things, whether in conjunction or repetitive. So in conjunction being, a number of different tactics, or repetitive, aka, hit you once with a particular abusive tactic, then hit you again, then hit you again, then hit you again. The intent here is to get you into a point where you normalize abuse, and then the boundaries for which you have, or a line not crossed is another way of putting it, gets pushed further and further away. So you would look at it and go, hey, what I accepted 10 years later within that relationship, I would never in a billion years have accepted in month 6. Just wouldn't have happened. Like, it would have occurred, and I would go, "Whoa, that's crazy. I'm out of here." Hit the eject button, all that kind of stuff. But that again, it's the slow boil up of, being the lobster in the pot until you kind of get to that point. And this is the thing that happens as well in abusive relationships, where people from the outside will look in and go, I can't believe you are putting up with that. How come you have not left yet? So on and so forth. And they ignore that kind of slow build up. But also, coupled up with a lot of that stuff is, um, whether it's gaslighting, whether it's cognitive dissonance, whether it's trauma bonding, whether it's trauma splitting, whether it's uh, uh, stonewallings, the whole long list of different things that you tend to have as a part of an abusive relationship. um, the individual who is within that relationship will tend to go through a whole lot of stuff that allows the abuse to continue, and allows the abuse to continue. It's a really bad way of framing it, but it's really just the conditions for which you need to survive. And they are a number of things that I'm going to talk about in a little bit today as well. But when you are in this, and I'll get to my story in a second, but when you're in this, you start to justify behavior. You live in this kind of world where you are genuinely thinking like you are the one at fault. You genuinely think it because you've been convinced you are. And you genuinely think the only way to fix these things is to change yourself. And you go, wow, I have created the conditions for her to yell at me and abuse me and gaslight me. That's my fault. So I need to fix that. And to make that work, so cognitive dissonance is essentially when two opposing truths sit together at the same time, and your brain can't handle it. Yeah. So you end up in this mode of, cognitively, the two truths are dissonant. They don't marry up with each other. And you protect yourself in those situations by either denying reality or reframing reality, or by splitting. So you deny reality where you kind of go, that's not the world I live in. Or you reframe reality and say, well, actually, the world I live in is like this over here. I believe what she's saying. I believe the world she has constructed. And splitting, which is, the kind of the mess beyond that, where you go, I've now forgotten um, the awful things that are occurring, and I only remember the good things. And the sad thing is, neither are truth in that situation, because you have to take the good and the bad, but also you split. It's like having a memory bank of everything good and a memory bank of everything bad. And again, the true memory bank is everything altogether. So when you look at a story like mine and you kind of go, geez, I can't believe you put up with what you did by the time you did, you forget all of that stuff that sits alongside, what gets you stuck into an abusive relationship. And more often than not, you don't appreciate the years and years and years of gaslighting that has occurred that kind of gets you into that point. So when I tell my story, be a bit more forgiving. I do come out the end of it, I hope, a stronger man, but also um, you have to go through hell sometimes to really start to see the world properly. And as I said in my last episode, if you listen to that one, I was an idiot. I was dumb. I was a fucking muppet, just floating along life. Working very hard because that's what I thought you're meant to do, and just not quite recognizing what I was in. So, getting to the story, um, we had moved into a new house, um, in a really nice area, actually, really lovely area, not that far from the CBD. And the house itself was shocking. It was a Californian bungalow with zero insulation, zero insulation. Whatever temperature was outside was the same temperature inside, which meant you either had to blast your heating inside, or you had to blast the cooling inside, just to kind of survive. Like, if it was -3 degrees outside, not that it ever gets that cold around here, but if it was 3 degrees outside, you'd have to sit inside with just the heating blasting just to kind of compensate. It was a crazy house. Pretty lovely neighbors, and we by that point had fully cemented my role in as the provider. So I provided all the finances for everything. She worked barely, and if she did, um, her money was her money, and it would always go into her account. And it wasn't until after the divorce I actually found out she had all these multiple accounts. And my money was always, I put in quotations, our money. But the reality was, by that particular point, she had full control over all of the finances. I had zero visibility over what was happening. But being young and dumb, and thinking that this was my soulmate, I was thinking that was exactly what we should be doing. That's how it works. Yeah, this is what a relationship looks like. So I was working insane hours, like 60, 70 hours a week. And on top of that, I was still doing 90% of the house chores. And a lot of that was what she would say was, oh, it's triggering for me to do cleaning. Like my mum used to scream at me whenever she had put the vacuum on. So, and even the idea of cleaning up just, triggers me. And I'm deliberately being nasty in the way I kind of play that back out. So apologies for my tone, but I would go, okay, fine. So I'll do the cleaning. So I was working full time, or more than full time, really long hours, extremely stressful job. Like it was very, very stressful job, very high stakes, and cleaning constantly and doing dinner parties, and I started to do the cooking, so on and so forth for her and her friends. And you'd start to see these things that would crop up, like, um, oh, we need to save up. So you need to cut back. So well, you need to cut back on your lunches. You're spending so much money on lunches when you go in. You're spending so much money on coffee. You need to cut back on your coffee. You need to cut back on the silly things you're spending at home, so on and so forth. You don't know how to manage finances. I know how to manage finances. I'll take the finances over. You don't worry your pretty little head. And anytime I tried to challenge it, or tried to find out what was going on with money, it would always be, um, yeah, 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 well, not right now because I'm really tired and I'm really stressed and I've had such a terrible day, and so and so was so mean to me today. I just don't know if I can go through it now. We'll go through it tomorrow when I'm in a better frame of mind. So I'd be like, okay, no worries. And then tomorrow would never ever come. Or it would be, you don't know what you're doing. Have no idea. You spent all your money and you're so irresponsible. You're pathetic and you're in so much debt. And be like, no, I'm not. No, you like I've got a car loan, like I have a car loan. Like that's it. Like it's not even an expensive car. Like it's a pretty ordinary car. Like it's just not really. Like that's it. And but she'd always frame it up like I was. Um, this fucking idiot who didn't know what the fuck he was doing. So therefore, it made sense that she had full control over every single dollar. And anytime I tried to challenge or raise it, it would end up in massive conflict. And there'd be screaming, and there'd be yelling, and there'd be tears, and sometimes it wouldn't even be about the finances. Like I'd raise something about the finances, and then 5 minutes later, she'd be screaming at me about something else, and consciously or unconsciously, I'd recognize a pattern and go, oh, anytime this kind of topic comes up, it ends up in disaster. So I better not bring this topic up. So that's the way it went. And in over the years, in this house, I didn't even realize it at the time, but my friends were starting to vanish. And part of it, like again, an abuser will seek to isolate you because that enables them to control the narratives inside your head, but also externally as well. And I, in retrospect, would kind of go, um, she'd be sitting there nattering away over people. Like, take for example, she met a friend of mine, Eddie, lovely guy, um, you know, penchant for poetry, but lovely man. And first time she met him, I kid you not, I reckon in retrospect, Eddie saw right through her. Went, "Oh, she's something." And I think in retrospect, I kind of feel like he was trying to flag it in that first meeting. Like we met at a pub, and I think he was trying to flag that this is not quite right. Like there's something not quite right here. And it was pretty clear, I think, that he saw it right through her. And the moment, like, not even hadn't fully left the pub yet, she was on about him. "Oh, no, 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 he's a terrible human being. Oh my god, I can't believe you'd ever be friends with. Oh my god, did you see how rude he was to me?" And I'd be like, "No, I don't recall him being rude at all towards you." "Oh my god, you just don't see anything, do you?" And it'd be that kind of conversation. And by the time we made it to the car, it's like, "Oh, I can never be, in a relationship with someone who's friends with someone like that. I can't believe you're not defending me against someone who's rude." I'd be like, "He wasn't rude at all to you in any way." "No, no, no, he was rude, and the fact that you don't see it, it shows that how, messed up you are and all this kind of stuff." And, by the time we had driven from the pub home, again, being young and dumb and susceptible to this type of crap, I'd go, "Okay, cool, I'll stop seeing Eddie." If that's gonna stop this conflict and gonna stop this, argument. And then I was doing all these things, so just talking isolation for a second, where I was, and again, my apologies, I am gonna go unscripted, like, I've got bullet points I'm going against, but this is deliberately a raw episode. But then I used to do this thing, again, talking about isolation, where once a month, I used to call it the Something Different This Way Comes program. And I had this set up before I met my ex wife. And once a month, I would organize an event, and it would be with my friends and with my work colleagues. And the event was, I had three rules. So, something different this way comes, three rules. Rule one, the event had to be something you had to participate in, not watch. So, you weren't going to a show, you weren't going to, go to a play. You'd have to do something, like it'd be caving, or we'd go clay target shooting, or we'd get the quad bikes out, all that kind of stuff. Um, so that was rule one. Had to be something you had to participate in. Rule two, the cost had to be under $150 each. Which, to be honest, we never got. We only ever got to that point once when we did clay target shooting, which is not that expensive. It was about like $130 at the time. But it was always kind of roughly around $50. And then rule three was the event has to be something you wouldn't typically do. So go karting, for example, which is not that unusual, is off the table. Doing an escape room, again, not crazily unusual, but that's kind of off the table. So it had to be something unusual that you wouldn't normally do in any other situation. So we'd go to a cooking class, for example, and would learn how to make dumplings, that kind of stuff. So we'd do that once a month, and I did all the planning and all the organizing and got everybody booked in and all that kind of stuff. And fairly, inexpensive way to be doing something really fun and interesting with your friends and your work colleagues on a monthly basis. And people used to love it; they used to look forward to it. And then my ex-wife would be in my ear. Have you noticed people aren't really that grateful that you're going to all this effort? Have you noticed that you're spending a lot of money, like $150 as a budget, once a month? That's a lot of money. Like we probably need to be saving that money up for ourselves. Do you reckon people are using you? Like, do you think people are using you? I think they're using you. So on and so forth. So at the beginning, like when she realized this is what I did once a month, she was fully supportive. This is like right back in. Yeah, the love bombing phase. And then it was this kind of slow nattering and quiet nattering in the background about, it does take a lot of time away from us as a couple. Like, we can't do things, so on and so forth. Just kind of this natter, 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 natter. And eventually I dropped the program. This thing that I had been running long before I'd met her that kept me and my family and my friends and my work colleagues connected and doing these really fun and interesting things once a month got dropped, and nothing took its place. So eventually I started getting more and more distant from these people alongside, the usual nattering you get of, "Oh, have you noticed this person is this, and have you noticed that person is this?" I couldn't be friends with someone who does something like that, and so on and so forth. Or, "Have you noticed you always get a bit depressed after you speak to blah, blah, blah?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I don't think I" "No, you do." All that kind of stuff, would go on. So this is pure isolation, yeah. So I was getting more and more isolated from my friends and my family, and so family was included in that isolation as well. And then it would be me kind of picking up all this work, and alongside all of this was constant criticism. There was almost nothing you could ever do right. Like you'd I couldn't fucking stand right. Like "Oh, why do you have to stand like that? Why do you have to rock when you stand?" And be like, "I'm just standing." "Oh, why do you have to have that tone?" "No, I'm just standing." "Oh my god, there you're doing your fucking face thing again." See, this stuff would kind of go on, and I feel like I'm skimming over some of the worst of it, and part of it might just be me trying to avoid talking about it when I kind of promised I'd tell you my story, but have all these things that would happen, and um, so here I was, like I was in this situation where I was being constantly criticized and being constantly insulted as well. And she'd just throw out these insults at you, and you'd be like, "Hey, I didn't like that," and you go, "Oh, for fuck's sake, can't you take a fucking joke, you pussy?" Like it's stuff like that, and you'd be like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 hang on," like, and you'd be like, I would never speak to you this way. And if you were, oh my god, just on that point, again, if you've ever been in these types of relationships, um, any even hint that I had a tone, not even the words, even a hint that I had a tone, she would fucking lose it. Don't you dare fucking talk to me that way, you piece of fucking shit. Would be that kind of response. And you'd be sitting there going, sorry, 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 sorry. And internally you'd be like, fuck, I would never speak to you the way you speak at me. And you'd just be kind of carrying your head. Or you'd be like, I'm sorry, I wasn't speaking, I wasn't giving you a tone, I wasn't giving you a tone. And if you tried to confront her and say, hey, look, I don't like the way you're speaking to me. It'd be like, you're so fucking sensitive. Like any other relationship, what would she say? Oh, any other relationship, they can have this kind of banter. That's why we don't work. That's why we don't work. Like because we can't have this kind of joking around banter. You're always so bloody sensitive, like little sensitive little flower. And it'd be like, no, I'm just telling you I don't like like the way. Oh God, can't you take a bloody joke? This is why we don't walk. And then she'd storm up in a huff and then demand that I apologize for upsetting her. So it was crazy. And then with so here I was now, bit by bit. I'm kind of starting to jump over a couple of years, but here I was now working 60 hours a week. I was being constantly insulted, constantly criticized. I was in this kind of mode where I was constantly fawning, like I would constantly fawn, go sorry, 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 or I would fight. So fawn, fight, flight, freeze, or I would fight, and I would end up screaming and yelling at her. And it wasn't until much later I started to understand a bit more about reactive abuse, but I'd be screaming and yelling, and I'd be like, "This is not me. Like, I'm never in my life, like, never before this relationship, never in my life. There's one time I can think of in my life where I have ever screamed and yelled, and that was with an ex girlfriend who told me she was cheating on me with a work colleague and that she had sex with him. And I yelled, um, something like "Get the fuck out of here!" Like that was the one time I had ever yelled in my life prior to this, and this relationship now suddenly that I was in with what would eventually become my wife. It felt like I was yelling all the time, and she would convince me like, "Oh, you've got such a massive anger management issue. You're always on tenterhooks. I can't be safe around you. I don't feel safe around you." And I'll be going, actually, well, I am yelling. Maybe I am not safe, and not quite seeing the connection between being goaded into a fight or having to defend myself against insanity, where she's trying to label me as something or saying I've done something which I have not in a million years done, and I'm trying to defend myself, and then she relabels it as me screaming and yelling. So this stuff would happen, and sorry, that's the my reminder coming up on my calendar that I will need to get going shortly. So this will be um, coming up to a close this episode shortly. But um, I'm still at this point where we're not even married, and this is my life. And I uh, was like, oh, maybe if I propose again, this is how stupid people are. And give her what she wants, which is she wants to get married. Maybe that's is a good thing. Maybe that will maybe that will make things better. And it sounds stupid when you look at it in hindsight, but the reality is, when you're in an abusive situation, your safety and your survival depends on appeasing your abuser. Yeah. So just get that through for a second. Your survival, so survival adaptation within a traumatic environment, your survival depends on the safety, depends on appeasing your abuser. So your brain goes, um, for me to survive, I need to appease this person, or I need to get away from this person, or I need to do blah, blah, blah. And, by this point, typically within a relationship, you're 100% entrapped. Yeah. You're scared about leaving. You're gaslit to a point where you think you're 100% the problem for absolutely everything, so on and so forth. So I was like, oh, maybe I proposed to her. So I won a scholarship. I got to go to Harvard Business School to do executive education. It's awesome. Um, highly recommend it. Bloody intense. And I decided to propose to her while we are in the US. And I remember talking to um, the kind of fellow attendees at Harvard Business School, and they're all like, "You have to get a prenup. You have to get a prenup. You have to get a prenup." And me, being dumb, was like, "No, no, no, this is love." But also secretly fucking scared, yeah. Like, I was like, "Oh, if I even bring up that type of topic with my girlfriend, she's gonna fucking flip. So I'm not gonna bring that topic up." So I said no. Um, so we got engaged and we got married. Now, if you think about um, abuse, so abuse will tend to ramp up when certain things occur where the abuser starts to recognize that they've got their hooks in a little bit more strongly. So they'll ramp up when they feel safe to ramp up. And safe to ramp up means either they will get away with it, or they know that if they do it, it's not going to have a negative repercussion from the victim. Yeah, the victim's not going to run away or any of that kind of stuff. Or, because again, abusers are not good long term thinkers. They're just in a really bad spot at the moment, like they're having trouble with their own emotions, so they ramp up. There's a whole thing around it. I can happily unpack it at one point. Maybe I will in one of the episodes. But so when we're in the fat flat back in the apartment, if you listen to episode one, the abuse was kind of minor. Then when we moved to the house, it started to pick up a little bit because now she was like, "Oh, we're both on the lease and we're both, I've got full control of the finances," so it kind of ramped up. After I proposed, it went way down and then started ramping back up. And each of these times, it got more intense and more frequent, more intense, more frequent, more intense, more frequent. Then when the marriage came, so wedding night, wedding day, actually, fuck that. The actual wedding, within 5 minutes after the not even 5 minutes, dear God, like 10 seconds, hadn't even fully made it down the aisle yet, her abusive nature spikes, yeah? And that wasn't even the worst of it. That was just a massive spike. Wedding night itself, um, I'm not gonna say what happened on the wedding because I probably reveal too much about myself, my family, so I don't wanna get doxxed, but the wedding night, no physical intimacy on the wedding night. Instead, she claimed that she had some unknown illness. She was deeply upset about how badly I had treated her through the wedding ceremony, um, how much she had to do for the wedding ceremony itself, how terribly people had treated her, how awful such and such was, and how sick she was feeling, and she demanded fruit. And it was out of season at the time. I can't even remember what the fruit was. Pineapple. I think it was pineapple. And sent me off to go find pineapple. Go into town, go into the CBD, find me pineapple. So me being a stupid idiot, I was like, "Yes, dear. No, dear. No, okay, dear." Tucked my tail in. Happy wife, happy life. I've got to go. Please my now wife. And went running into town looking for pineapple, and couldn't get into the CBD, and ended up finding like these two tiny little pieces of pineapple into this huge platter of fruit. And I ended up spending a fortune buying this massive fruit platter just to get these two tiny little pieces of pineapple because I had to make my wife happy. Again, this is the stupidity you get into when you're in these types of relationships. And it's what, as far as I'm concerned, a good husband does. And then I don't think she even ate it. I got the platter, heaps of food. Cost an absolute like it was 40 or $50 for this platter, and I'm not sure she even ate it. I don't think that was the point though. Like in retrospect, like if I think back, I kind of go, I think she was just making sure she had the strings in and going, dance, puppet dance. And, you know, so there I was. That was my wedding night. Went to bed. I was bloody exhausted because, it'd been a long day. And I'd just been blasted for a few hours about, being pathetic during the wedding ceremony, and then, have been running around like a headless chook trying to get this platter of food. And then hopped on the plane off to Thailand for our honeymoon. I'd got us this resort, and the millisecond she was on the airplane, perfectly fine. She was no longer sick. She was, extremely well, and it was like if you look at the the actual moment of switch, like I remember watching it too because it was all like grumble, grumble, grumble. Oh, I'm still feeling unwell. Oh, it was such a terrible night. Like I was so unwell. Blah blah blah. And then she had a conversation with uh, a stewardess on the plane who was just like, "Oh, hey, how you going?" And she's going, "Oh, we're on our honeymoon. It was our wedding recently." And then the stewardess is like, "Oh, well, we'll get you some cake and we'll get you some champagne." And the ex-wife is like, "Oh, there's free stuff to be had." And I was like, this instant boom. She's chipper. She's perfectly fine. She's perfectly well, and she's putting on this whole show of like, "Yeah, no, we just got married," and like it was just the whole fucking thing. It's bloody hilarious. So then we're married. And yeah, I've told you what my wedding night was like. That was my wedding night. Um, for those of you who, I doubt you're interested in my physical intimacy, but those of you who are, when it did finally, it was framed up as duty. It's my job as a husband to, make sure his wife is satisfied and happy. So that was what it was like on the honeymoon itself. And I'm gonna kind of slightly twitch because, as you know, I'm doing this in a really unscripted way, but I'm gonna slightly go off script for a second because I got some bullet points that I'm running by. But I want to talk about a couple things at this particular juncture. One is what actually was the abuse like, after you were married? Like, I've given hints so far along the journey, I reckon, but I haven't really explicitly sat down and gone, "This happened, this happened, this happened, and this happened." And part of that is, I'll call it part avoidance, part storytelling. So I might do a bit of a step through. Now, the summary to that, though, is if you look at the blueprint of family violence that's on the website, that or everything that's on that blueprint, that's it. That's the entirety and the sum of it. But I'll give you a rundown of everything kind of in between marriage and kids. So I'll step through that. The other is, as you're listening to this story, like I might have started off saying, "Hey, be a little bit forgiving," because I was stupid. But there's components to this which are worth understanding. So the second thing is how do you end up um, in a position like this where abuse continues and abuse ramps up and you don't do anything about it? So I'll give you a couple of like highlights on abuse of what occurred, post marriage. So it was occurring before the marriage, but it just ramped up to a really noticeable point or really strong point after the marriage. Pre kids, because when the kids came along, we had twins. When they came along, um, it was fucking insanity after the kids. So I'll talk about the fucking insanity separately because that's just next level, and it wasn't even the worst of it. Believe me. But the kind of post marriage up to the kids bit. So um, People talk about walking on eggshells. So I'm going to do a rapid fire of going through the different types of abuse that was occurring. People talk about walking on eggshells within an abusive environment. I don't think people really understand. Like, it's a great metaphor. It's a great visual. Like, oh, you're walking on something and it might break. But um, the kind of constant panic, which you give a nice little title called hypervigilance. The constant panic over doing the wrong thing is next level. Am I standing the right way? Am I smelling the right way? Am I moving in the right physical way? Have I looked at her in the right way? Have I moved towards her in the right way? Am I, I think I said smell. Is my tone in the right way? Do I look the right way? Et cetera, et cetera. It's not like just walking on eggshells. It's every fiber of your being has to be fully monitored to make sure it doesn't set off anger or set off some sort of insults or some sort of reframe of why are you doing this? You're doing this because of these reasons, and so on and so forth. So walking on eggshells, in my mind, is just not really an appropriate terminology for it, but it's probably the closest you can get. And it was like that. Like, you were constantly on and aware, and even when you were asleep. Yeah, so you don't sleep properly because you're worried that you might snore too loudly or that you might, bump her in the wrong way that was going to set off an argument in the morning and all that kind of stuff, being in bed, like all of that kind of stuff kind of plays out. So that's what it was like, just kind of the day to day. And then just kind of rapid fire. I'm going to do this out of order, just based on what I'm thinking about. But finances, yeah, she had full control. But I didn't find this out until um, pre-divorce. So after the kids, and once I started to enact my exit planning, um, she would rip me to shreds over any dollar I spent. You know, scream at me over shampoo, like, you have to have the $2 shampoo from the bottom, and I'd be like, can I please have the $2 shampoo? Because that's what you do. You appease. And she had to have L'Occitane, which is a really expensive brand. "I do this for you, you never let me take care of myself," all that kind of stuff. But, I had no visibility over the finances, and when I did get visibility, this is, I'm jumping ahead to, um, getting close to the divorce, was dumbfounded, but also not dumbfounded to discover that, she was spending more than double of what I would in a month on herself. All her craft supplies and all her clothes and makeup and all this kind of stuff and hairdressers and blah 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 blah. Shouldn't have been a surprise, but it was. But then again, just to rapid fire. So no apologies. She would never apologize for a single thing unless it was sarcastic or showcased. So sarcastic would be, "Oh, I'm sorry," and showcase would be, "Somebody's watching, so I'm going to make a show of apologizing to you because that manages the narrative." Yeah, and if ever there was either of those, it would always be followed with a, "But you see why I did it, yeah?" And it would be full on, I was justified to do X, I was justified to do Y. Nothing was ever her fault, ever. Never her fault. Everything would always be my fault, some way. Passive aggressiveness, sulkiness, silent treatment, all of that kind of stuff was there. And if you've been in an abusive relationship, you know when that tone is happening. Like, you feel the barometric pressure change. The you kind of can tell in the text messaging as you're heading it, like, what do I need to buy before I come into the house, all that kind of stuff. What do you want for dinner? I'll get it, all that kind of crap. And then just the way that the timing of the text messages are, the tone of the text messages, you go, "Oh, I'm in for a night." Like, she's going to explode at some particular point because I can tell, the way she's texting. Or you'd walk into the room and you just like you feel the coldness. You're like, "Oh, something's happened. She's about to blow." Insults, contempt, snide remarks, like, that was just, the norm. That was just the norm. And everything was always barbed in some way. Like, um, there's not a single thing you can do right. You can't play right, you can't talk right, you can't pronounce your words right. Like you probably noticed in my episode and last episode that I occasionally mumble up my words because I have dyslexia, so I kind of occasionally mumble up my words. And it can never do that right. It was always just insult the crap. She hated being touched, which I thought was a really interesting thing. Hated physical affection unless it was on her terms. And if you did touch her, it would be kind of met with this revulsion look. But then she would demand cuddles, typically when she wanted sex. Like she'd demand it, like, give me a hug. Like it would literally, like, give me a hug, that kind of thing. You're like, okay, cool. And if you're like, hey, I kind of do like a little bit of, PDA, this is earlier on, pre marriage. It'd be like, "Oh, you're such an insensitive prick. Like you don't care about how I feel at all." You'd get that kind of response. Um, but post marriage, there was no safety. Like, um, you the abuse rate, like as you can probably get from the wedding night, the abuse ramped up quite a lot, and there was no feel of any form of safety at all. Everything was an open book to her, and it's an interesting topic actually because if you think about it, there was a few things at play. One was she'd breach my trust. Like she would go through my phone, she'd go through my emails, she'd go through the files on my computer. She demanded syncing of calendars. She demanded that I have location sharing on, all that kind of stuff. Just because we're a happy family and we're gonna know where each other are, and all that kind of stuff. So she'd know exactly why did you take so long to get home? I saw you on the thing. Where did you go to beforehand? Why did you go to that place? Why did you take that? Like all that kind of stuff. And it was always dressed up in kind of language of either curiosity or care. But it was all still just dressed up abuse. Um, but there was no sense of um, uh, privacy. And the other aspect to it, so that's kind of physical surveillance. Then the other aspect to it is uh, I'll call it emotional surveillance slash gaslighting. So emotional surveillance would be she would monitor my moods and say, "You are feeling X," and I'll be like, "No, I'm not feeling this. That's not the emotion I'm feeling and displaying at the moment." And she'll it'd be like, "I know you better than you know yourself. Yes, you are." So the reason why I put that slash in there is the gaslight would be gaslighting you into feeling like this person actually does know you better than you know yourself. And after they've been on and on and on and on at you for hours, sometimes you'd actually walk away going, maybe I was feeling that. Like maybe I was actually feeling that. I didn't realize maybe she actually does know me better than I know myself. So you'd get this kind of feeling of lack of safety and this kind of constant you're constantly surveilled. There is no place where you are free. She threatened to commit suicide very frequently, and for those of you who've watched my fake suicide, the impact fake suicide threats as a form of entrapment in the blueprint of family violence videos. You'd kind of go through that topic a little bit in that one, but if ever an argument kind of got to a point where it was kind of clear that I might actually have a point, it would be you're driving me to a point where I just want to kill myself, and it would just like nuke the whole conversation. You'd be like, stop, 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 stop. Okay, let's get you. No, I don't need help. I just need you to change. I'd be like, no, no, let's get you some help. Like you've just threatened suicide for the 15th time. Let's get you some help. It's like, I don't need help. I just need you to change. You need to be better. You need to do better. And that would be the answer to her apparent suicide ideations. And then all the usual stuff. Again, just rapid fire. Every single secret I ever told her was used in some particular way in arguments. Sometimes it was even in the affidavits when it came to divorce, which I'll get to in a different episode. Which was just like, what the fuck am I even going through here? Constant reactive abuse, would always goad you up into fights. Darvo was her biggest favorite tool. Got me every single fucking time. Like it, Darvo worked on me really, really, really well. Back in, I'll call it back in the day. But that one, gaslighting, Darvo, word salad, they were really, really effective tools against me at the time. Um, before, after, like pre-awakening moments. Isolation I've already spoken about. Memory was an interesting one. She would convince me that my memory cannot be trusted. So I'd go, "Oh, such and such happened," and she'd go, "No, that's not how it happened." And I'd be like, "No, it did. Like I've got the photos to show." "Oh, you're not remembering it right." I'm like, "No, I got the photos are right here." "No, you're not remembering it right." And then completely twist it out. And it would get to this point. If someone tells you over, a decade that your memory cannot be trusted and you always get it wrong, and that you always reframe the past as a way to kind of put her into a bad light, after a decade, you start to believe it, and you start to go, "No, my memory can't be trusted. Like I can't remember a single thing. I don't remember it right. I always seem to twist things so that she's the villain here. Honey, can you tell me how that happened or what happened then?" And you kind of have this little dual thing that occurs where A, you start to lose trust in your own memory, and B, you recognize that to assert something on the past will likely start a fight. So you defer to them and say, "You tell me what happened," because you know that's not going to start a fight. If I say, "Hey, you tell me what happened," the way you see it, then I might be safe. So you end up, gaslighting yourself, but also putting yourself into these odd little positions. Convinced me I was mentally unstable and that I had some. Again, this is like I'm just talking about the abusive tactics that we use between marriage and kids. She had convinced me that I had some sort of unknown childhood trauma that had occurred that I had blocked from my memory, which is why, as she would say, "There's nobody else on the planet as fucked up as you. You are. Nobody in the world thinks the way you do. Nobody else behaves the way you do. You need psychiatric help." And she kind of convinced me of that. That maybe I actually do have like a childhood trauma that I've blacked out. like like I genuinely started to believe I had this my car that I'd mentioned earlier around the one that I'd bought. I'd paid it off. Loved that car. It was beautiful. BMW 320i. Not that expensive. Such a gorgeous drive. Like that thing, like leather seats, you'd hop in and whatever direction you told it to go, it would go. Like it was actually my dream car when I was a kid. Like I used to play with a toy version of it in white. I had the blue one, and I loved it. Like I was worked really fucking hard to be able to get it. Worked really fucking hard to be able to pay it off. And she convinced me, "No, we don't need it. It's got to go. Like it's arrogant and showcasey, and we're not those kinds of people. And the fact that you have a BMW, like that, just tells me the type of person that you are. And I've never met someone who is so arrogant and up themselves that drive a BMW. So you have to get rid of it. You have to get rid of it. That's just not the type of family we are. Like, is that who you are? Are you just an arrogant cunt? Like, is that is my language? Is that who you are?" But that's the kind of language she would throw at me. So, I eventually sold it, and like, yeah, it's gone. Sad, sad day. And then with the proceeds of that, I had to buy her a new car. So I bought her a new car. And that's again, sorry, I'm just rattling some off. And then again, I've already spoken about criticism. So hypercriticism was insane. Finances was insane. Um, she would do this thing where, again, I'm talking post marriage, pre kids. where anything that was somehow her responsibility, sorry, anything that was her responsibility would always turn out to be somehow my responsibility. So she demanded a craft room so she could do all the crafting and do her hobbies in it, and it would turn to shit. Like you couldn't even fucking open the door. Like it was just this. I got no other word for it than just this pile of filth. Like if you can imagine a hoarder's house, that craft room would always turn into a hoarder's house, and it was always my responsibility to have it cleaned. And to be like, no, it's your craft room. Like I do the rest of the fucking house. This is your craft room. And then should do this again for people who have been in these abusive situations would recognize the always and never statements. You never help me and you never clean. I always have to do everything. You never do anything I ask you to do. I always carry everything in this household. I always, so the always and never says absolutisms. So you should do these absolutism statements. And I'd either end up in a fight trying to defend myself, going, no, no, I actually do help out around the house. You'd have to go in real respectfully. Yeah, you don't fight. You go, no, no, I do, because you don't want to set her off. Or you'd end up trying to clean. And then if you do try to clean her craft room for her, you should scream her head off. You've done it wrong. You do this. You would never help me. Why can't you just like it? So on and so forth. I think I say so on and so forth a lot. I think that's my shortcut for this is the triggering thing. I don't want to talk about it. And then on rage, so she would go ballistic. I used to call it going nuclear. And again, I'm doing rapid fire, going the type of abusive. I'm painting you guys a picture of what my life was like. And she would always deny having lost her temper. It'd be like, no, I didn't lose my temper. You lost your temper. And I'd be like, no, like you were screaming like a banshee at me. I don't scream. And then she'd flip it and go, if I did scream, it was because you did dot dot dot. So this is classic deny, reverse offender victim role. So Darvo. And then you'd end up in this whole like, can you not like, do you not remember? Like, I never say that to her, but I'm like, do you not remember actually just screaming and yelling? So you'd have these kind of things that would occur. And then uh, she would tell me she wants a divorce, how evil and how awful a human being I am, how I was just a walking fuck up, and so on and so forth. Again, I'm so on and so forth. My apologies. This kind of constant walking screw up, and then we'll always, if ever I did do something, it would always be telling me that I did this to hurt her, and you'd be like, "No, I actually did that for like I literally just went to the toilet and I forgot to put the lid down. This wasn't a massive attack on you, like So it was a bit insane. I almost did my so on and so forth again. My apologies. And then would demand like, oh my god, it would be instantaneous praise. So if she ever did anything, if you did not praise her within the millisecond of her having done it, she would just go ballistic. You never appreciate anything I fucking do. So you'd be like, um, I remember my mother had gotten me this really expensive bowl for display, and it was weird. Older people get these things, and it was just like this really fancy, really expensive bowl. And I came home, and the ex-wife had used it for her wedding. So really expensive, decorative bowl that rather than using a bucket or even just like a plastic takeaway container, she'd use that to do her wedding in. And like she would have had to take it off the display shelf, everything. Actually, I don't know, probably wouldn't have even been on the display shelf, but she would have had to take it out and then specifically used it to do the wedding in. So I remember coming home, seeing it on the in still outside in the garden with the weeds in it, just left there, for God knows how long, thinking, "What the fuck?" And then, kind of like door having opened, so half a millisecond of like barely walked through the threshold of the door, and then you didn't see I did the garden. You saw I did the wedding. Why the hell don't you thank me for it? And like going nuts at me. And like I still had my key in the lock, getting screamed at for having not praised her for doing the weeding outside when I hadn't even fully made it made it into the house yet. So that was my life. Yeah. And, stuff would start to happen, that were, kind of the going nuclear stuff was really interesting because, in the way I would see that was, um, something would set her off, and it was really interesting. So either, she would use going nuclear as a way to deflect and shut down. So deflect and shut down would be, um I've identified something that she has done that's wrong, and she has identified that the best way to completely destroy this topic as a thing that it's ever raised again is if she explodes at such a level, that she screams and yells about every single thing that going nuclear means. She is angry over every little thing that has ever happened in the history of time. So nothing is without range. So just wipes everything out. Or she would do it, when she was kind of struggling with her own emotions, and she'd just like let off, and it would just be like boom. You're like, whoa. Um, quick rapid fire. Still, apologies, is a long one. Always played the victim. Always played the victim. She was always the victim, no matter what. Like things would happen at work, she was the victim. Things would happen in relationships, she was the victim. Poor me, so on and so forth. I might pause there because I feel like I've gone through a slightly long list. But the summary is, um, everything that is mentioned on the websites of Bluetooth, Blueprint of Family Violence against men, I've been through. Um, and some of it has been pretty intense, some of it has not. So then, why do you not? So, what are the reasons why someone would stay in an environment like that? And this is where I'm going to go, for the end of this particular episode, and I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes on it because I think it's really, really important. But you do for a few reasons. So one is the slow rise of um, the abuse, and you are essentially with an individual who learns how far to push you, and how far to pull you back, and um, they start to kind of get to this mode where they themselves recognize if they've pushed too far, and they'll apologize and appease and try to kind of get things back up a little bit and like make promises. Oh, this will never happen again. So on and so forth. Apparently, that's going to be my catchphrase for these episodes. And they'll kind of pull you back in, so they'll kind of hoover you back. And other times they'll kind of push and then go, right, I've set a new baseline for you. Now, if you've had a look at my website, if you've had a look at the TTI model, which is tactic, trigger, and impact, then I talk about a lot of this under the tactic topic, which is what does conditioning look like? What does uh, Pavlov's dog kind of reactive training look like? And then how does abuse start to operate within an abusive environment, which is either it's coupled up with other things, like someone throws you a sequence, or they throw you a whole bunch of stuff to see what sticks, and they kind of work that way. And that only works because of either they are conditioning you to it, so they're kind of pushing hard enough, and you yourself have triggers. which is exactly what I was. So I've spent an hour probably on this episode talking about the situation I was in, and the reality is I myself was not blameless. I was fully blamed. Actually, I'm going to talk about this because this is important. Um, my own triggers were sitting there for ripe for abuse. I had a really strong belief that you have to be in a relationship and get married and have kids and get the white picket fence and all that kind of stuff. That's what I grew up to. That's what I believed. I was a really, really strong believer that the male's role is to provide for the female. That was my job, you know. And as a child, I had been, brought into that, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, I have a job. My job is to provide for my woman. And that is exactly what I will do. And that's exactly what I was trying to do within. I was working my ass off. I was doing everything I possibly could. And my um, a man's job is to self-sacrifice. Men hear this when they're kids all the time. It's not about like our feelings aren't really like suck it up, buttercup. Like our feelings don't matter. What matters is we roll up our sleeves, we get the job done. So when you're in an abusive relationship, that really does open you up for abuse or being stuck into an abusive relationship because you just feel like um, suck it up, buttercup. Yeah. So you're getting yelled at. My feelings don't matter. My job is to provide. Roll up your sleeves, suck it up, buttercup, get the job done. Be a man, be a real man, and you get locked into these kind of things. Now that's the kind of cultural external aspect. The internal aspect is I was carrying insecurities. I was carrying immaturities. So insecurities being I didn't have a huge amount of confidence in myself when it came to relationships, especially when it came to setting boundaries. And the more you let go, the more you kind of go, well, maybe that's okay. I also um, kind of suffering, I'll call it suffering the effects of abuse. So I've spoken about these in another video, which is kind of cognitive dissonance and trauma splitting and all that kind of stuff. And for those of you who have read my book, um, actually, I highly recommend you do. I actually talk about how abuse hijacks healthy emotional processing and the impacts that it has. So, kind of, this um, internal interrupts, the kind of things that you do yourself when you're in the middle of abuse to interrupt healthy emotional processing because it's safer. And they're the things that typically lead you down the road to fawn, flight, fright, feces. You know, mispronounce those, but anyway. And then there are ways that the abuser will, I call it mess with your head just for shortcut, on your healthy emotional processing that will also kind of get you looped up into these different types of things. And I'm not going to go through the entirety of the book because that's an episode on its own right. But it's worth having a read because you kind of go, oh, I can now start to see where I, in a traumatic experience, have created my own cognitive dissonance or I've created my own interrupts that have, they've been a survival mechanism. They've helped me survive, but they're not healthy. Like they're not allowing me to be healthy. So I was entrapped. I genuinely worried about leaving, which is again part of the reason why you don't leave because you're like, oh, you know, she's going to spread lies about me. I will not survive on my own if I leave. Like that's another thing that they convince you of. So she had convinced me that I was such a pathetic human being that I couldn't survive without her, and if I left, then I would, be I would suffer and I would make a mess of my life and because nobody else on the planet would ever put up with someone piece of crap like you. I'm the only person you're lucky to have me in your life. I'm the only person who'd ever put up with you. So you should say those types of things, and I'd be convinced of it because of all the gaslighting that had occurred prior. But also, you have disassociation, you have trauma splitting. So disassociation is essentially it's kind of like if you can imagine you're inside your head and you something bad is happening and you grab the eject cord or the eject pull and you yank it and you just like boom, straight out the cockpit. And that's disassociation. Well, it's probably the worst description of disassociation ever. I can describe disassociation to you, but it might cause some people to cry. But disassociation is, yeah, you kind of eject out of it. So the abuse is not happening. So back to my point, which is why do you stay? So the abuse is not happening, and if it is, it's kind of um, something that's not quite there. So actually, I'll describe this one. So I'm going to give a trigger warning. So and again, like I'm still only talking about the lines not crossed here. I haven't even got into the worst parts of the abuse yet, which will be in the next episode. So I haven't even got to the worst abuse stories yet. The next episode. But in disassociation, you would the best description is imagine you're laying on a beach and it's nighttime and your feet are just touching the water and you're kind of laying there in the sand and behind you is a run of trees. And when you're disassociated, this is what it feels like. It feels like it's nighttime and you can feel the sensation of water lapping up against your feet and they kind of cause your body to push backwards and push forwards, push backwards and push forwards. And occasionally that tide comes in. You know, you can feel it getting stronger and worse. This is a metaphor, by the way, not an actual physical feeling. It's a metaphor. So you can feel the sensation of something happening. So you're kind of cognitively aware that there's something occurring, but it's a sensation that's kind of just a thing that's slightly separate to you. Now, you can also hear in the trees behind you um, rustling and animals and all that kind of stuff. And while you're laying there, it's dark and you kind of dozy off, and you got this sensation of being pushed slightly forward and backwards because the water's lapping at your legs. You go, oh, sounds like it might be a cat and a dog. I wonder if that's a cat and a dog. And then you might see a little shadow on the side of you. You go, oh, it might have been a cat. And then you kind of doze off to sleep because it's like a rocking sensation that puts you to sleep. That's what disassociation feels like. Coming out of disassociation is you wake up and you kind of blink your eyes and go, "Oh shit, the sun's out! Fuck, it's daytime." Okay, cool. And you kind of look at yourself and you go, "Fuck, I'm covered in sand." And you kind of stand up and like the tide is out, so it's no longer over your feet. And you kind of go, "Oh fuck," and you start to clean yourself up. Shit, I got sand everywhere. I'm feeling dirty. I'm feeling lucky. I'm feeling filthy. I need a shower. And you kind of look behind you and you go, "Oh, there's some trees there. Oh, I can see it." Little tiny cat kind of roaming around. Maybe it was a cat. I don't know. It could have been anything. Whatever. I'm going to go home and have a shower. That's disassociation. And my apologies if that was triggering for anyone who's been through that sensation. So when you're in an abusive relationship, that happens. Like you have that sensation, and like physically, um, it's like your brain goes on fire and then goes into that mode where it's kind of numb and you don't process like at the back end of it you don't process any of it. So there's no point where you cognitively come back. So again, my point was, you know, how do you stay in an abusive relationship? So there's no point where you come back and go, that was bad. I need out of this relationship. Yeah, that was bad. I need out of that relationship because you were disassociated at the time. The bad things were happening. Now, trauma splitting, which is related to this, trauma splitting is when you, I think I might have mentioned this earlier, is when you go, hey, here is a set of really good experiences that I've had with this individual. Here's a set of really great experiences I've had with this individual. And you file them away, and your brain says either A or B. Either A, I remember all the good experiences, and I do not remember any of the bad. So if you had have asked me in the middle of that marriage, so between marriage and kids, you had have said, "Hey, what's your married life like?" I would have, in all honesty, said, "Fucking awesome. Love married life. I'm the luckiest man in the entire planet." In all honesty, because when you asked me that question at the time, I'm only drawing from one filing cabinet full of happy, happy, happy memories. And the filing cabinet, which has got all the abusive stuff happening, is locked away. It's not. I'm not even aware it exists. It's kind of locked off, locked and away. And then in trauma splitting, what will happen is um, when your abusive partner kicks off again, it's like opening up the drawer a touch on the memory of the bad, and it all comes flooding back. You go, "Holy shit! There's a whole filing cabinet full of memories here. What the hell?" Like, holy shit! So again, why do you get stuck? You get stuck because on your normal day to day, that filing cabinet doesn't exist. It's only in moments of high conflict when you're back into abuse that you go, "Holy shit, this filing cabinet exists. Why didn't anyone tell me this filing cabinet exists?" And then you go, "Shit." And then by the time you get a moment to yourself again, you've pushed that filing cabinet, you've closed that filing cabinet, you put the lock in, and you've gone, "Hey, I'm going back to the filing cabinet A, the one with all the happy memories." And you do that maneuver because that's survival. That's pure survival instinct. That's a survival adaptation, traumatic experience. You go, "Hey, it is scary having filing cabinet with bad memories open. I'm going to close that and push it away and pretend it doesn't exist." And that's just pure survival. I'll give you a classic example. I am writing a book at the moment, which is like a full written version of the Blueprint of Family Violence. And in fact, it's a foundation for a lot of the videos that I do, and that kind of it's much further along than the videos are. The videos are slowly catching up to the book. And I was writing in that book a couple of months ago, and I was sitting there going, "Oh my god, I can't believe that I genuinely forgot that she did this thing." And I was sitting there going, "Geez, I should have mentioned this to my lawyers. I should have mentioned this to my therapist." And I remember distinctly sitting there going, "That was the worst experience I have ever been through in my life. I cannot believe that I completely forgot that she did this highly, extremely abusive thing, and it's the worst abuse I have ever been through in my entire life." Then, not 10 seconds later, it was gone. No, I couldn't remember a single thing. I was sitting there, 10 seconds afterwards, having gone, 10 seconds ago, I was sitting there going, "I can't believe I forgot all about a thing." And it's now 10 seconds have passed, and I cannot for the life of you at all remember what it was, except for perhaps the colors red and the color yellow. That's all I remember. Color red, color yellow. That's all I can tell you. So that's trauma splitting in action. And I'm obviously a trauma coach who's working on my own stuff, but I also have a therapist who I see regularly as well. So I support people. I have a person who supports me. You'll be really surprised who doesn't do this work and also has their own therapist. But you have those types of things that occur, and you'd be like, "That's trauma splitting." The memory is gone. So that's how you end up stuck in these types of relationships, and you give yourself hope that things will get better. You have what I used to or still refer to in the Blueprint of Family Violence as a loss of agency, which is over the course of the relationship, you give away your decision making rights to the abuser to the point that even minutiae, smallish type decisions that you have to make you have to either mentally check whether or not it'll be okay in the abuser's eyes, or check with the abuser that it is a okay to do this. So you have when you get really stuck into a relationship like this, you feel like you have to actually ask your abuser permission to contemplate leaving. Yeah, so that's loss of agency. So people do get stuck in these types of relationships. But we're coming to the end of this particular episode, and this is actually a really good point to end it on. And that is because how do you get from all of that to awakening? How do you get from um, everything I just described, from trauma splitting to cognitive dissonance to loss of agency, trauma bonding, hope strategies, cultural aspects that, especially from male victim family violence, that entraps them within these abusive environments, to actually getting out, or at least even kind of getting to an awakening moment. So that's what my next episode is going to be about, which is once the kids were born, what occurred, because if you've been following my story so far, you'll already know that once the kids were born, the abuse will have increased. So I'll tell you what occurred after the kids were born. So how do you go from that to even heavier abuse, and then to an awakening moment, which allows you to start to, some people refer to it as radical acceptance, which is in itself got a question mark over its effectiveness. But how do you get to this point of going, hey, I need to wake up and realize that I'm in an abusive relationship, and start to come to terms with it to a point where I can start to um, move towards an exit and safety. So that's going to be the focus of the next episode, where I'm going to talk to you about after the kids were born. Then I'm going to talk to you about three specific incidences that occurred that created awakening moments for myself. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what it feels like to navigate through an awakening moment, and the kind of short epiphany, the short um history, short feeling of that is not an epiphany. It's fucking scary. But I'll talk to you about kind of navigating through it. So we'll leave it there. Look, again, my first episode one's due to release in 2 hours. I'm going to edit this one. Well, not edit. I'm going to leave it as raw. I'm going to put some video onto this one, and then get it set up to go in a couple of days from that. So I'm not going to see any feedback from the first episode. But if you have feedback on this episode, please let me know. If you can't stand my ramblings, if you just want me to go to a script, I'm more than happy to move to a script. If you don't mind being unscripted and rambling, just tell me either way. And if you're interested in hearing more of the story as well, just let me know in the comments, and I'll do the next episode. Um, Thank you. Speak to you then. Thanks all. Bye. This is Stand Again, lived experience platform for male survivors of family violence. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Your voice might just help another man find his. If you're looking for one on one support, you can book coaching with a member of the Stand Again team. Simply visit standagain.com.au, where you will also find grounded information on surviving and recovering from family violence as a man. As always, remember that no matter how many times you've been knocked down, you can stand again.